So I'm really excited to be here with my friend Sara Fowler, who is Vice President of Winemaking and Operations at PEJU in the Napa Valley. If you've ever been to the Napa Valley, you have been by PEJU, and maybe you've stopped in too, because it's right there, almost in the very center, in the heart of the Napa Valley. So welcome, Sara.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and you know, I'm so thankful that PEJU and you have been so supportive of Come Over October and Share and Pair Sundays. It's just been, it's been great. Which makes me want to ask you, where is your passion for wine come from?
Oh, well, my very first job ever was working at a winery, and I worked for the first with Jess Jackson and Jed Steele. But I started fermenting in high school with my dad beer and took our pairs to distillery. So I've always enjoyed, I was allowed to have a little wine growing up, and I enjoy food first and foremost. And with that, wine just kind of naturally came along.
Wow, so you were allowed to drink a little bit of wine. Was this in California? Where were you?
I was. And so Northern California, my family has a 400-acre organic ranch up in Lake County that's been in my family since 1884. And so we grew most of our own vegetables and made, had animals and just really kind of hippie parents. And yes, they were okay with me drinking some wine as long as I stayed at the house.
Let's hear it for hippie parents.
That's right.
Wow. But I think when you grow up like that, which sounds just idyllic, but you grow up thinking about wine as a kind of food, as a normal part of enjoying life, of being together with your family. It's really a very helpful way to introduce a kid to responsible wine drinking.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always allowed my children to have a little wine and wanted to make sure that they understood that really it's more, I view it more as food, that it's meant to enjoy and bring people together and not to be abused.
Yeah, yeah. Well, your wines are in front of us, so I've got you here, so we're going to taste these. So let's start with your Sauvignon Blanc. This is the 2024. I'll tell you why I love Sauvignon Blanc, but you tell me why you like it first.
So I think it is fresh and bright. It's crisp. It's made in lots of different styles. This style is, I would say, more California style with some very tropical fruit notes. I think it goes really, really well with food. And at my house, we call it house water.
We probably could call it that at my house, too. I love Sauvignon Blanc because it has this little thread of beautiful herbalness in the back of it, in a sense. And when I think about food, I think, is there a dish that isn't better by throwing some herbs on it, fresh herbs, right? So, and it seems like every dish in the world benefits from a little bit of fresh herbs. So if you don't have fresh herbs, maybe you have Sauvignon Blanc.
That's right.
Right? It's the equivalent of throwing just this little botanical freshness into the mix.
And well, you're much more eloquent in your word choices than I am, but I totally agree. And with the really bright acidity and the herbaceousness, it's just a really delightful beverage.
Yes. This reminds me to ask you about something that I think about a lot. I am a word person, so for me, I use words very carefully, and I've been thinking lately about whether or not acidity is the same as freshness in wine. What do you think?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think we use acidity and freshness together a lot. However, I think there are a lot of wines that can be considered fresh that are younger, maybe like younger red style, like lighter red styles, that I would consider fresh, that may still have some acidity in them, but maybe not quite to the same level. So I would consider them fresh if they're kind of clean and bright. And that brightness is also one that you would think of acidity. That's interesting. I think they're correlated, but not same.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I think of freshness, and I do think Sauvignon Blanc is fresh, I think of splashing your face with really cold water, like cold water in a stream, let's say. You're out hiking. there's no acid in the stream, but that feels so fresh, especially on a hot day. And so Sauvignon Blanc to me is, it's kind of like a cold beer too, on a hot day. That's real freshness, and it's addictive. I love that feeling.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's taste your Cabernet Franc, which
Okay.
is the next. You and I share a love of Cabernet Franc. It's the father of Cabernet Sauvignon. I know we're swirling our wine on the table, so it's
I know,
making
sorry.
lots of noise.
Well, we've got the Sauvignon Blanc and the Cab Franc
Yes.
together with.
That's right.
Yeah.
So these are the parents of Cabernet Sauvignon. Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc had this nice moment in nature about 500 years ago, and the result was Cabernet Sauvignon. So Cabernet Franc is a very ancient variety.
And it's delicious.
And it's delicious, I know. It's a
It's like-
little leaner, I think, a little sleeker than Cabernet Sauvignon.
I definitely agree, and has more, a little bit more of the herbaceous characters to it. Maybe leans more towards like red fruit as opposed to maybe the darker fruits that you get in Cabernet Sauvignon. But that peppery, spicy character is just delightful.
Yes, and I always feel like if you cook, well, let me turn it around and say, in my kitchen, I love to cook with things like cumin, coriander, all of those what you might be thought of as sort of Moroccan kinds of or Middle Eastern spices. Every time I taste Cabernet Franc, I think about cumin, coriander, all those really slightly exotic spices.
That's good. Those are good.
So delicious.
Now I'm going to remember that. Yes.
All right, well, let's compare it to the Cabernet Sauvignon since we have your Cabernet right here. This is the 19 Reserve. Ooh, great. Okay, let's give this a try.
And so different vintage years, 22 versus a 19. Very different in age and style.
We're friends, and I know you well enough to ask you this question. How do you know if you've made a good wine?
So for me, once it's bottled, if someone wants to go back and has a second glass, to me that's where I'm like, I feel like I've done well. For myself personally, it's really, I want balance. I make wines with intent to go with food. So sometimes, maybe my acidity might be a little bit more bright for someone who just wants a quaffable wine. But I think I'm looking for balance, and I'm looking for proportionate flavor profiles for like the fruit and the tannins. I want them. You make wine with that that is going to go along, going to have a journey, right? So you taste wines early on when they're younger, and you put it in a bottle, and you just have this feeling in here that that it's going to have a really great journey. Maybe it doesn't necessarily wander the way. It's not like the straight line; it wanders. But to me, it's really about putting all the pieces together and setting it off to the world, and knowing it's going to have this like really interesting meandering journey. Because what I think is delicious and great might not be what someone else does, but I'm hoping somewhere along the journey it finds a good pairing with someone else's palate.
Yeah, yes, that's a really important point because you are going to, in a sense, send this out into the world for lots of people to enjoy, and you have to. It's a little, to me, it reminds me a bit of writing because, I suppose I could write quietly for myself and not publish it at all. But what is really fantastic is to write something, you're there by yourself for a long time, sometimes years, and then you put that piece out into the world for people to read. And when people are touched by what you have written, it feels like, okay, I did a good job here.
That's exact. There is a good correlation that I always attribute making wine like being a chef, but I can see where the writing also kind of lines up with kind of that same artistic journey with like whether it's writing or cooking or making wine.
Yeah.
And hoping that someone at some point will go and will enjoy it.
This is so delicious. It has a very rich core. I always, whenever I'm tasting Cabernet, I imagine kind of a painting and the frame, right, being the tannin. Hopefully that frame is not, I don't know, not severe. It's soft tannins. But then the picture can be faint, or it can be bold, or it can be really rich. It can be really dense, kind of painted with very lush colors. Boy, this is really quite an incredible core of picture right in the center. Delicious.
Cute. They're made with love.
I bet they are.
And they're all organic grapes.
Yeah, good.
And yeah.
Do you think Napa Valley will ever be known for anything other than Cabernet Sauvignon?
Ooh.
It does so well here.
It does so well, but it's interesting. I mean, we've had other things planted over the years, and as the consumer's tastes shift and change, and maybe our weather, whether we have like less water or more, it'll be interesting to see. Like, not maybe so much in the next few years, but there's definitely, I think, there's a shift right now on people, what they're planting or what people are thinking about planting. And it's that, 10 years ago it would have been 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, not 100%, but close. And now there's a lot of discussion and conversation about what other varietals would do well and what could the consumer be, yearning for in the future. So I think there's going to be some really interesting things coming out in the next, 5-10 years.
What would you consider planting if you could, I don't know, take a little piece of the PEJU vineyard and plant something else? What was your
Like all sorts of little
crystal ball thing?
I would do some sort of a fun, and it's a matter of like what would do well here that hasn't necessarily been planted here. But I think some fun like Italian or Spanish whites, maybe even Portuguese, maybe. But yeah, I mean, like I'd plant a little bit more Sangiovese. We are planting a more Cabernet Franc because I love it so much, but not just Bordeaux varietals. I think a sprinkling of other varietals that, like maybe some Nebbiolos. Like there's some areas and things that might do really well, and I like to play. Blending is one of my favorite things to do, and so having access to multiple varietals that are just interesting, that maybe not everyone's making, really appeals to me. So, and that's not a definitive like answer, but that's more broad stroke. But I think maybe a palette, if you will, of different types of grapes that we could play with and mix with and then really kind of learn from.
Yeah.
I think that there's just maybe the consumer's ready for something a little different.
Yeah, well, I always think to myself how difficult it is really to be a winemaker in all kinds of ways. It's difficult to make great wine. But the other thing that's hard about it seems to me, is you only get one chance a year. And if you think about a chef, right, a chef is drawing from hundreds, potentially thousands of ingredients, and can, roast 500 chickens until he or she feels like they've got roast chicken down. But winemakers, especially if you're in the Napa Valley, you have to make a Cabernet. You make a really wonderful Cabernet. I'm sure that you do, in a way, need creatively to play around, do other things, because that's how it seems to me creativity works.
And that's true. So we do lots of experimentation, even with, the 9 or the 12 varietals we've ended up having. We get very creative with whether it's our oak selection or our yeast selection or how we're making wine, because that is the fun part. And that's the artistic aspect of making wine. There's the science portion of it, and certainly there's the agricultural portion, but getting to play with the different varietal blends. This happens to be 100%, but the Cab Franc it has a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon. It's 100%. Sometimes it's fun to go back and do the blends, and truly 1 or 2% of something really does shift and change the flavor profile. And so having something to play with is important, I think, to keep the creativity. Otherwise, I don't know, I could be making beer.
Well, you could make beer in addition,
well, that's
maybe.
True, yes.
I have heard people say that, how can 1% of another grape variety. When you think about, you've got this big tank of Cabernet Franc, how could 1% of something else make a difference? And the best way I've ever explained this anyway is, and I actually did this once because I created the wine program at the Culinary Institute of America. So I had the students make some cakes, and one of the same cake, one of the cakes though was missing vanilla.
Oh.
And it was 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And all those pastry chefs, they're like, something's wrong with this cake. 1 teaspoon in an otherwise big batter of cake batter made a difference. And so can 2% or 1% of Cabernet Sauvignon in a Cabernet Franc make a difference? Yeah, it's the teaspoon of vanilla in the cake batter idea.
That's a good way to do it, because you'd be missing something.
Yes.
You would be. And Cabernet Sauvignon by itself can be delicious. It is just fun to see what a little bit of something else sometimes can make some taste.
Yeah. Sara, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your great wines with me. It's been fun to talk with you about them. Thank you.
Thank you very much.